Hello, and welcome to Candor, where candid conversations open career doors. I'm your host, Natalie Kintav, and today we'll be having a candid conversation with Udie Chima. Udie Chima is a senior product designer at Zillow and works on their design system team. After graduating from Oberlin College in anthropology, he worked in tech support but continued to search for a bigger purpose and passion. One day, by chance, he was asked to do a usability test for a startup, which brought him in contact with the UX field. He loved that it blended so many of his interests, including psychology, business, and technology. Over his career, he has worked at both startups and established companies in the Bay Area and Seattle. He and his family are located on an island off the coast of Seattle. And in his free time, he likes to produce music and DJ. Udi, it is such a pleasure to have you.
Hey, what's up, Natalie? It's so good to be here.
Yeah, so good to talk to you and excited to get to know you a little bit more. So my first question, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get to, yeah, just dive into who you are.
Sure. Yeah. Like I'm from Seattle and I've got three brothers. I think growing up, you don't really realize if you're how different or normal you are until you get older. And for me, that was definitely the case. My mom's Jewish, my dad's Nigerian, so you know, I would have friends come over, and they would come to for dinner, and they'd get something on their plate that they'd never seen before with spices they never heard of before. And this was kind of like the first time I started to think, well, maybe I don't have the typical American story. And then when I was 13, we had a bar mitzvah. I had a bar mitzvah, and my small middle school, half the kids attended, and I know for a lot of them, it was the first time they'd been to a bar mitzvah and probably heard of a bar mitzvah. And I think some of these things honestly probably made me a little bit self-conscious of my identity and my place in the world. And it wasn't until college and after college that I started really, find my place and find people like me and realize that, the unique perspective I had and grew up with kind of gave me a unique point of view and something else to offer.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I definitely echo and agree with a lot of things that you were saying. For myself and my sister, we went to a really small, elementary, middle school, and high school, where some of my childhood friends are people I've known since I was five. And I think, like, when you were talking about like having a plate of food in front of you or it's unfamiliar, it makes you a little bit self-conscious, especially depending on where you're growing up and who you're surrounded with in your neighborhood and community. But then once you get exposure to different people, different cultures, different experiences and perspectives in college and after college, you feel a lot more confident about just your background and upbringing. So totally echo a lot of things that you're saying. But thank you for sharing a little bit about you. I'd love to learn, how you found your way into UX. I know that you had started with a usability test. Take us through that journey.
Yeah. For me, the journey starts when I was just graduated from Oberlin College. I went back to Seattle, and I always loved technology. And I was that person in the house who my parents would go to when something broke down. So I found a job at a local computer store, selling computers, helping people solve problems, and I loved it. I got to help people, which I loved. I was surrounded by really creative people like photographers, graphic designers who used Mac computers, and it wasn't so while I was working there, I got a call from my brother who was in San Francisco, and a room had just opened up, and he's like, "If you want to move out here, the room is yours." And being into technology, San Francisco is like the mecca. So I dropped everything. It was probably the most reckless thing I've done it up until that point. I moved there without a plan, and honestly, for the first year I was there, I was just hustling. Like had a brand ambassador job. I remember one day I was selling hummus out of a truck on the street to people, just whatever I needed to do, trying to find my foot into the door of tech. But until I found a job at a startup that was making software for taxi companies, and I thought I made it. I had an office job. They had like a closet full of snacks for us, and like you said in the bio, this was when I got my first exposure to design. So there'd be somebody from time to time, they would kind of let me be a usability tester, so I got to see what they're working on. And I just loved the creativity, just the mix of business and psychology that went into that. Fast forward, I started at an office job. Over time, we moved closer and closer to our users, which was taxi drivers. So actually started working out of a cab yard. And this was kind of when I would say like my technology dreams kind of started to turn into like a nightmare. The taxi yard, you'd walk in, it smelled like gasoline. Drivers would be zooming in at 40 miles per hour, and you have to dodge them and stuff. And we'd be working in this room upstairs without any air conditioning or heat. And one day, it was my job there to get updates out to drivers. There would be a new software update, make sure the drivers get it. One day, I was getting the software out. Didn't seem like there was any problems. I went home, went to bed, and then I get a call, like a frantic call from my boss. He says, "You got to get back to the office right now. There's something that's not right about that software." So I was living in Oakland at the time, drove across the Bay Bridge. It was probably midnight by the time I got there. And, like, get into the cab yard, and there's already a lineup of drivers upstairs where we were working, and they've got like a bunch of notepads, and they got all their rides recorded, and they're stuffing their phones in my face, saying like, this cost me money tonight. And I was this was hectic for me. This is something I didn't want to be, and this was the moment that I realized, yes, I like helping people. Yes, I like technology, but I had to reassess my career plans. I knew this wasn't what I signed up for, and I thought back to when I really did enjoy working in tech, helping people, doing tech support, collaborating with the designer and finding out what she was doing. And that's when I really looked to see how would I, if I wanted to make this move into, I didn't even know really what she was doing to do what that designer was doing. I'd have to, I learned it's UX design, and there's different ways to do it. So that's when I started to apply for boot camps. I joined General Assembly, and in time, I landed my first job, and I loved, for me, it was so validating to know that I wasn't just helping people problem solve. For the first time, I could actually prevent those problems from happening and solve the problems of, in the product.
Wow, there are so many things that are really interesting that you said. I mean, the story itself of, your drive from Oakland to the Bay, over the Bay Bridge, and really just facing that hectic moment like so early in your career in a startup, to, your willingness to pack up and move to a new city, to also your career goals. I want to dive a little bit more into your career goals, but first, I really want to ask you a little bit more about your mindset and just really experience just packing your bags and moving to a new city. I think it's something that would be helpful for advisees, especially ones who are maybe considering moving to a new city, especially, during the pandemic, people just decided to leave, the Bay Area, for example, and move to a new place. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe share something you wish you knew, knowing what you know now?
Yeah. let me unpack this a little bit, because I moved pretty fast in the story. But if my wife was here, she would remind you that one of the things that I dropped in my reckless move to another state is we were dating at that time, um, and it was probably the hardest part of that move was knowing that there's this really great relationship that that this isn't the right move for that relationship, but it is the right move for me right now in my career, because I had at a certain point kind of plateaued and I didn't see a way forward. And I would tell, and you know how it ends. We got together. We stayed together. We got married. So it has a happy ending. And I think if I was talking to somebody who might be really devoted to their family and where they came from, the friends that they have in the city, maybe all that's wrapped up into their identity, and they really have fears around what it will take to pursue the goal that they want to go after. I would say that it's never you're never too you're never too young to you're never too young or too old to reinvent yourself. The kind of the story that you tell yourself, the identity that you tell yourself, is just a story. And I think most of the time you don't regret the things that you do; that you regret the things that you don't do. And in my case, I would have very much regretted if I hadn't made that move and at least seen what was there for me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that's something that will really resonate and, inspire just people to think about reinventing themselves, just not being afraid to take that leap. And even though it is scary in that moment. So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate your vulnerability and want to dive and go back to your career goals. I know you said that, earlier when you had the cab story experience, that perspective kind of shifted your career goals into wanting to actually help people and prevent challenges within a product. How have your career goals evolved and changed now since then?
The first job I had, I had a idea of what design was, and that was based on what my friends were into at the boot camp I went to, and what I heard in podcast or saw in Dribble. And I thought good design was just stuff that looked really good, polished, gradients, back uh, drop shadows. I thought sexy design was good design, and I realized, as my career has grown, that the thing that the user is doing on the screen and the what you're designing at any moment is just a small slice of their whole end-to-end experience on the product they're using. And even more than that, if you zoom out, the app is the least important part of what they're doing that day. They're trying to accomplish a goal in their life. Like, let's say that going back to my example of moving across the country, if you're designing Airbnb, you might be designing somebody who needs a place to stay because they're making a reckless move across the country. They don't care about how slick it is. They just need it to work so they can secure that bed in an unfamiliar place. So I think, as long as over time, my career has taken a bigger view of design and what I'm doing, and really looking at the whole journey the user's making.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's something that even I've learned for myself working in startups and learning more about just UX design, just user experience. And it's really more about, the user journey. And you touched on, something that, for you may seem for some people a misconception about the work that you're doing. Just the concept of sexy design is a good design. What are some other common misconceptions or assumptions that people may have about the work that you're doing, or maybe even about product design?
Uh, I think unless you work in tech, I don't think that I actually don't think there's much of a conception at all about what product design is or UX design. So I think that's the most common. 9 out of 10 people I talk to who don't work in tech, they when you tell them what you're doing or what you do, they assume you're a developer or you're a programmer. I try to explain that I'm kind of like the architect. I don't build the thing, but I do think about how it should work. But to me, to be honest, that's not to me to be a known designer or people know what you do. That's not that important. I kind of if with design, the best design goes unnoticed. It's invisible, and it's like I like to DJ too. So it's the same thing with a DJ. You know, the best you don't really notice the DJ until the record skips or like they put on Ron Isley, and you're like, what the heck did like what are you playing right now? So that's okay. You know, it's okay to kind of be a blue collar designer, just focused on doing the work.
Yeah, I really like that analogy of what you're saying, that, the best design is something that's invisible. And, especially with your passion for DJing, I think it's definitely something that resonates where you don't notice the DJ until something goes wrong or the music turns off. But yeah, I really, really like that insight, and really just great takeaway that, and just breaking down those misconceptions around design. I know you had said that when you were transitioning to become a product designer, you were involved in boot camps like General Assembly and other things. What tips would you give to any aspiring product designers based off your experience?
Um, I think the most important thing to keep in mind when you're developing as a product designer is when I mentor people or advise people who are just getting started, I tell them that you're the we're designing products, but really you should see yourself as the most important product that you're developing. Kind of always be in beta. Think of yourself as Chris Doe, a hero of mine. I saw him tweet recently. He said that um, when he married his wife, she bought the base model, but it came with upgrades for life. And I love that. I kind of think that's how you grow in your career. You should never stop. You should never settle. And um, so whether you're getting started or you've been in your career for 10 years, always look for the next horizon.
Yeah, I really like that analogy of one. Well, I guess maybe we'll hashtag it always be in beta. Maybe we'll get that trending on Twitter. But also just that quote of, you're starting out at your base level, but there is always just upgrades, and just really, thinking about that constant learning and constant areas of improvement. So for you and yourself, I'm sure you've had your upgrades, and maybe you're in a beta mode, or hopefully not a beta mode, but you've been upgrading in your career. Um, where do you see your career going in the next 2 to 3 years, 5 years? Um, yeah, how do you want to upgrade in your career?
Um, I there's something that I really liked about that early company I worked for. Um, Trees, the first company I ever worked for, and it was the impact that you can have as an early designer. Um, I kind of fantasize about, I didn't know what I didn't know back then. There's a lot of processes that I wasn't aware of that leads to the best design. But I'd either love to advise startups who are really, are just starting out, because you can have that impact and they can move in all these directions. They're not constrained by legacy code or anything like that. Um, or be a founding designer and actually have that first design role. I don't know when that might be, but sometimes I think back. And I don't think this is uncommon for people who work at big companies, by the way. I from kind of talking to different people, they swing from big company, and then they kind of go into you know the chaos that is a startup, and then they kind of it can swing back and forth from time to time.
Yeah, and something I want to just piggyback off of a little bit. And right now, you're a product designer, senior product designer at Zillow. You've worked at startups. You've also worked at established companies. What would you say are, pros and cons of each environment? I think that's something that would be great for advisors to hear, especially ones that, you know, have been, maybe working at an established company, wanting to know what that's, pivot is like to a startup, or even ones who are interested in startups, or even ones who are interested in established companies.
Hmm. Yeah, working at both established companies and startups, there's trade-offs, of course, for each one. For a startup, there isn't a roadmap for what you're doing. There isn't a process to follow. And from day to day, you might be working on totally different things. That might be marketing materials. Maybe you're uploading things on the social media site or building a landing page or building feature stuff in the product. And that's great. The plus of that is you can get a lot of knowledge into different domains of design. However, there with that comes unpredictability and so that's something to keep in mind for a bigger company. And this is what I found. I was after some of my startups experience, I was looking for how to, a more established process and doing the things kind of the state of the art. And you do find that, and you can learn a lot about different frameworks for solving problems at bigger companies. However, like I said, trade-offs. They're the output of your work, because it's almost like a government checks and balances. You can't just release things because there's a lot of stakeholders and partners involved. So the kind of like talk about velocity, the movement, the speed that you move is slower. However, you can learn more and get more things into your tool belt that you'll might be able to apply wherever you go.
Yeah, so I'm hearing themes, within a startup environment, having your hands in a lot of different things, whether it's building features, marketing materials, etc. But with that comes a little bit of unpredictability, not much process, kind of building the wheel as you fly. As a
Hmm. Yeah, you're like doing heart surgery on the horse while it's in the Kentucky Derby, that type of thing.
No, I can relate based off my personal experiences in startups. Definitely a lot of build as you fly. But also a theme that you'd mentioned was just, especially on the flip side with established companies, you have, process. There's, maybe more structured environments for learning. But also, flip side of that, not as much speed, a little bit of not Big Brother, but checks and balances to go through the things and process, and things are a little bit slower. But no, I really appreciate you recapping both of those environments and experiences. Like for myself, I've only been in startup environments, and I think that other flip side of the checks and balances would be something.
Yeah, it's good to get exposure to both. I recommend trying, seeing, being in both worlds for some time.
Yeah. So Uday, I want to ask you a couple questions unrelated to your 9 to 5 and your day job, and want to hear a little bit more about who you are outside of work. I know you have a family. You also are a DJ. How do you create that work-life balance for yourself?
Um, well, there are some things that are really important for me to get to kind of find peace of mind and balance myself. I wake up, before the kids start waking up. I do some yoga in the morning. I do some meditation, and that's just a really good time way to set the day on my own schedule. And then then kind of in work, even this is something I've more done for longer my career. I kind of gained the confidence to try to carve out things that I can own and that I love doing at work that still, serve the company. So like what I'm talking about here is every Friday I host a we call it Friday Beats. So I play music. People can come show up to the Zoom room. Sometimes I'll DJ. Sometimes colleagues can DJ. There's a sign up sheet, and I just love being with people who love music. So for me, that's one of the hours I look forward to all week, and I think it's great to find moments in your job that are just fun. Just you would do this even if you weren't getting paid, type of things.
Yeah, I love that. Where you mentioned that you're just able to bring who you are outside of work into work in a way that brings people together, but also brings you joy during your day. That's a really cool. I really like that Friday Beats name. I also,
Yeah, yeah. Bring it to Candor. I remember there's a couple DJs on staff.
yes, yes, and I definitely want to hear some of your music as well, for sure. So, Udi, I have just two more questions really for you, and something I think I know myself, I struggle with this, have struggled, and probably will continue to struggle with it. I know advisees probably think about this, maybe other advisors. Have you ever grappled with imposter syndrome, and if so, how do you manage it?
Oh, 100%. It never go. Yeah, it never goes away. But um, there. So early on in my, I'll tell you something that really helped. Some like a message that really stuck with me. Um, Early on in my time at Zillow, I just joined the team. I was so excited to be at Zillow. It felt like a dream had come true. I had a one-on-one scheduled with my manager Tim Barlevins, and we were on our way up to the 36th floor in the Zillow Tower. Beautiful, beautiful sights of Seattle from downtown. And I had my laptop in my hand. We just grabbed a LaCroix, and we're looking for a booth to sit down. And we sit down, and Tim was looking at me, and they could just tell that I wasn't in a good place. And he asked me what's going on. I can tell something's up. And I open up and I just tell him, I ever since I joined Zillow, and this was maybe 2 months in, I told him I just haven't found a place on the team. I feel like I am not contributing like the other teammates. I told him my teammate, he can make a design brief before you come in early and make a whole design brief multi-page thing before the day starts. I'm in meetings where they're throwing out names like OKRs and TOF and HDP, and I don't even know what these acronyms mean. I feel lost, and he's like listening, and he tells me, he like reassures me that, listen, I hired you for a reason. I see what's in you, and you're comparing yourself to senior designers. I know that's something that you wanna grow into, but what you need to remember to become a senior designer is no two senior designers are the same. The type of senior designer that you're going to be is going to be totally different from your colleague, and it's not about trying to bring up your weaknesses. It's about emphasizing your strengths. And that really, from that moment on, that really changed my perspective about being self-reflective about what are the things that I really do well. I'm a systems thinker. I I can bring storytelling into my design. I facilitate meetings and really bring ideas out of people we're collaborating with. So that was really empowering for me. And when I get down and I try to think, I think that I'm not measuring up in some way. I just try to remember those words that he shared and try to double down on my strengths.
Yeah, I love that. And definitely, Tim sounds like a really great manager if he's still your manager. Uh,
Yeah, he's not, sadly, but he was a great manager.
Yeah, but I think that moment probably, definitely has had an impact on you. But I think just, celebrating your strengths and knowing that you have something different to bring to the table. And, it's natural and easy to want to compare ourselves to that next level or to a peer. But I really like when he said that no designer is the same and no engineer, no salesperson, no insert title is the same. And with that, I have one last question for you, Udi. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to your younger self or anyone who's starting off their careers or maybe looking to pivot in their careers?
Yeah, when I talk to people who are just reach out and want to get into design or they want to grow in their career, um, I often give the same advice, which is, and this is so sad to recognize like over and over again throughout my life and throughout my career, which is that there's like no shortcuts out there. Um, you know, people sometimes have expectations about how long it's going to take to get it to start something, and the really sad truth, and it's sad because I want that cheat code, I want that, those like in your Mario Kart, those things you like zoom, you go through and you like zoom down the track, but I haven't found them in my career. So I try to just set people's expectations that you can have everything you want, you can reach the goals that you want, but it may not come at the speed that you want today, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think it's really, like you said about the journey, and there's no shortcuts, there's no magic mushrooms in Mario Kart. That's but it's definitely, like you said about just the journey and just learning, and it's okay. You'll get to the end, however long it takes. Well, thank you, Udi, for all of your insights, from your journey of being a product designer, sharing your story of how you took a leap of faith to move to San Francisco, your advice on imposter syndrome, and so much more. We're really excited to have had you on this episode.
No, this is great. Thank you so much, Natalie. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you all for tuning into this episode of Candid Conversations. If you're a college student or recent grad from an underserved background interested in connecting with Udi one on one, apply at candor.io to join our platform as an advisee. If you're an industry professional who shares our mission to democratize access to transformative careers, we'd love to have you join Candor as an advisor. Until next time.